Hi everyone, it's Tim from Aussie Expat Home Loans. Welcome back to the latest episode of our Property Pulse. Today I'm very lucky to be joined by Luke Pervan, co-founder and director of Property NXT, the latest property buyers group in Singapore. Very happy to have you here with us, Luke.
Thanks for having me.
Today we are going to be breaking down everything commercial property. So I get a lot of inquiries from my clients. Normally they get told something in the street or at a barbecue saying, you've definitely got to invest in commercial, you've already got some residential property, you've got to diversify. So today I really wanted to help break down how is commercial property different, why is it a good investment to consider if you're an expat, what are some of the things that can trip you up if you're not aware before you purchase, and I think you're the perfect person to do that given your background. So I thought it'd be good if you could just share a little bit about I guess your background first, and then also how you started Property NXT.
Perfect. So, look, simply put, we started Property NXT. Co-founder and I, Silla, who I work with very closely, we co-founded it basically to bring options to people of Singapore, and we will expand out from there to other regions of Asia Pacific as well. But the fundamental thing I noticed living in Singapore as an expat is what's the available options for buyers, and what's the available education level. So, are there people up here that know things like commercial real estate? You know, a lot of people know about residential, but the idea that, you know, do I diversify into commercial? That's a bit of a minefield, it's a bit confusing, and you're dead right. You see social media clips, you see news articles, you see things, commercial real estate's a bit of a buzzword, and if you're an educated investor, if you've perhaps own a number of residential properties, it is something you should consider, but fundamentally it's knowing what you're getting into, knowing the terms, knowing the rules and regulations around it compared to residential, and the risks. And, you know, it's great to think of the positives all the time, but there are risks with every investment. And part of what we like to do is sort of outline both and then take people on a journey. And if it is the time to buy a commercial real estate investment, then we'll definitely encourage it and help the people do it.
I think something I always talk to my clients about is diversification. And, you know, in residential property, diversification often means, you know, maybe purchasing in different states or different localities to obviously target growth, but avoid things like land taxes as well, which can really, they can add up, especially in Melbourne, as everyone's been hearing and seeing at the moment. But obviously a commercial property is also a really good way to diversify. And especially if you want to build a portfolio that has a lot of long-term value in it, I think commercial is a really important thing to think about as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is. Commercial for us is, it's another string to the bow. So there's nothing wrong with residential investing, and I want everyone to know that I personally have residential investment properties. My co-founder has residential investment properties. We're huge advocates of that space, and it's a great wealth builder. But if you're looking for that word diversification, it's an avenue to explore. It's a great way to get, which we'll touch on later, a greater return on your investment. But there are inherent risks with, you know, the potential lack of tenancy over a period of time. So you do have some shortage, the word I'm looking for is you can have tenants that are harder to find for a period of time. So you can have longer vacancy rates. But if you get a great tenant, a great asset, you can do very, very well out of commercial real estate.
Definitely. I think there's different classes of commercial as well. So maybe we'll kind of start at the beginning.
Yeah, let's do that.
If we talk about commercial property, what exactly are we talking about?
So for me, the main three classes are retail. Everyone knows what retail is. It's your local shop. It can merge into your malls, you know, your big shopping malls, and also your bigger retail centres in your more regional towns. So, you know, you've got a Class A tenant, like perhaps a supermarket, and then along that line you can have smaller shops. Now that can be split up into individual investments, or you can actually have a whole package. So that's retail, and then you've got obviously office buildings and so forth. So, you know, we know what we're looking at there. You own a business, you want to rent somewhere, you either go into an office building or a retail area, a commercial area. And then industrial, which is, to me, is probably the most exciting phase of the commercial space, is industrial warehouses. They're now building quite small boutique industrial warehouses for businesses to go into, and it's taken advantage of the changing landscape of Australian buying power and how we're doing business in Australia. So I'm happy to touch on all three, and it all depends on what the buyer wants, and it's understanding those nuances in each one.
So I think for a lot of people it comes down to, you know, obviously that some people will gravitate to maybe retail or office because it's something that they see as a bit more tangible or they have a bit more experience with. But in my experience, especially industrial especially at the moment, seems to be where a lot of the good opportunities and returns seem to be, I guess, in the market.
Yeah, I mean, and for us, it's a really simple process. Our whole philosophy at Property Next is customer first. So, you know, we scale everything back. We don't necessarily say you have to go here. We don't pigeonhole our clients. It's about, you know, I talk about this a lot when we talk about residential. It's what's your budget, what's your location. Now, location's is important, but, you know, you can get opportunities in commercial all over the place. But there's definitely trends, and so then from those trends is budget, and then what are you looking for? And then it's our job to educate, because if we don't think the office market's great at the moment, we'll point you in a direction for something else. And fundamentally, it's your decision as the buyer, but we want to make sure that you feel comfortable in what you're buying, knowing you've been armed with the right information.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What would I guess if we're looking at commercial versus residential, what would you say are the main differences between the two as investments?
Okay, so we'll silo them both. So residential, as everybody knows, is somewhere to live. So if it's an investment property, you've got a tenant. So it's a young person, it's a family, it's someone's living in your property. So you set your general lease terms are a 6 to a 2 year lease. You know, so it's a shorter lease period. There's a lot of stability with people needing somewhere to live. You know, there's a huge supply and demand crunch on rental properties. So from a supply and demand issue, residential investment's great. Generally speaking, though, you won't get as much return because there's possibly greater opportunity for capital growth with residential, and there's also a lot less risk with finding new tenants because we know supply and demand, etc. So commercial, though, take it away from there. Generally, you can get a bigger return. So in residential, Sydney market 2.5%, up to 4.5% regionally and in other states. Commercial sort of 5 up to 9% depending on the asset. So you get a much better return on commercial. There's huge advantages to commercial. Generally, it's a net lease, so the tenant's going to pay a lot of your bills, council rates, water rates, insurances, all of those various things. There's great tax benefits, but the risk is you lose your tenant, and so there can be a greater time frame to find that next tenant. So that bigger rent, that bigger return is there to sort of, I guess, you know, keep yourself insulated a little bit. The other thing with commercial over residential is a commercial tenant is a business. Not generally speaking, they're a business, and you want that commercial tenant to build up goodwill. So they've got your property, it's their address, they're going to look after the property, they may have clients coming in or out of that area, so their goodwill is built up over time, and then hopefully they then treat it as their own and they can then grow their business from there. And so the tenancies are longer, and commercial tenancy is quite a minefield. Well, we can go through later if you like, or it's a separate conversation, but you know, there's a fair bit of security once you've got a tenant.
Well, generally those leases are longer term leases.
Correct.
Right? So typically it might be 3 years or 5 years with an option to renew for another 3 or 5.
Correct.
At the end,
and
right?
those options are critical for the tenant because, and for the owner, but for the tenant, because if they build up that goodwill, if they've invested in the area, they've invested in marketing, then they want to have the option to continue. But for the owner, if it's not working, then they have an option to get someone new in.
Yes.
But you've got that strength of time.
Yes.
Yeah, that longer tenancy.
I'll just point out as well, the lease terms generally affect the type of financing that we do as well. So yeah, maybe I can give a quick breakdown.
Please, because I'm interested in that too. Because I talk about it, I always say I'm going to introduce you to Tim to help with the financing.
And look, doing it as an expat, it is a little bit trickier. We just don't have as many lenders available. We can still do it. Two things to think about. So the first thing is when you finance commercial property, the type of loan you take out is very different. Normally on a residential property, you've got a 25 to 30 year loan term. It's just amortizing over that period. It's very straightforward. With commercial facilities, the loan term is typically tied to the same term as the lease. So if you've got a 3 year lease or a 5 year lease, the loan term will be 3 or 5 years. We would normally negotiate with the bank whether there's any amortization over that period, or if you want to elect to pay down the loan. At the end of the 3 to 5 years, the bank has the option to call in the loan, but typically what happens is we will roll it over. So if the tenant rolls over, if you get a new tenant, then we can just go back and say to the bank, okay, can we roll for another 3 years, 5 years, based on the new lease that we have? Otherwise, yeah, if you don't have a tenant or if you want to do something different, then we can negotiate with the bank to kind of do a pay down strategy as well.
And if I turn question asker for 1 second, does that then affect, because we tell our clients before we send them to you that you need a greater deposit for commercial, banks require more, plus
Yes.
obviously with the loans, is that correct?
There's two types. Yeah, there's a few different ways of financing, but there's a process called lease stock. It's the most straightforward, and it's especially for expats, it's the easiest one for banks to accept because essentially they look at the property, they look at the return that they're getting from it, so the rental, and then they'll lend you a multiple based on that. So the rental has to cover a certain amount of interest on the loan, and then they determine a loan amount by that. The LVR on that, it just depends on the property and the rental, but you'll find it'll generally be between 50 to 60% is what they will lend against the property.
Yep.
If you want to go down the other road, which is what they call a full doc, which is where you as an applicant give all of your financials over, you have to substantiate affording the loan. Again, it depends on the property, it depends on the location and the size, but it'll be between 60, 70, 75 is typically the max that we see.
Yeah, so we tell our clients before sending them to you, 30% on average.
Is
deposit
general of thumb. Yeah,
Okay.
definitely, and maybe more depending on the type of financing.
Okay,
that we
so
do.
that's
It's a little bit more complicated than obviously the resi stuff. So, but I think the most important thing is it is possible. You just need to make sure you've got the capital to put down for it.
Yeah, we're huge advocates of Property NXT at commercial real estate, and it's one of the reasons we formed the business was we love residential and we think it's a great place, but commercial for us is that diversification play. But if you've got the ability to be able to finance it, which is the critical part, bigger deposit, and can absorb the loan structure, then the returns you can get if you've got a good tenant basically take care of the property.
Definitely.
And they look after the property if they're a good tenant. So
Definitely.
it's a great way to do things.
In terms of, I guess, the longer term returns on commercial property are very much tied to the rental return. How does capital growth play into commercial property? Because obviously for residential property, it's normally pretty straightforward. It just depends on supply and demand in the market. But I understand for valuations on commercial property, it can be very predicated on the rental return that they're getting.
It's tied to that. But I look at capital growth a bit more sort of a broader picture in terms of, yes, that's how a value will look at it. But if you're in an area with huge government spending, infrastructure, what are the reasons people are going to want to live in an area from a residential standpoint? And if they're moving in there, they'll need commercial assets. So you need your supply chain pieces in place. So the way I look at it is, if they're required, so if there's a huge growth in an area, then for me, that next phase, okay, we're going to need commercial assets to supply the goods and services that these people need.
Definitely.
So therefore, there should be natural growth in rental uptake, particularly if there's a supply and demand crunch on those things. So that should then raise capital growth as well. So yeah, you can look at just your number, but then your return, but then also you should be looking at the overall factors of what's going on in Australia.
I guess, leaning into that, what are you seeing at the moment in terms of hotspots, regions? Where is the growth really happening?
Great question, and it's one we get asked all the time. So for us, it's there's two regions that are really on fire at the moment, which is the southeast Queensland market, and that's tied a lot to huge government spending, the 2032 Olympics. That Gold Coast, Sunshine Coast, and Brisbane region's amazing. The Perth WA market has been going great for basically since COVID. I call Sydney the big beast of Australian real estate. It is just a market that chugs along. There's huge supply and demand issues constantly. It's a place where people want to live. It's a place where people want to work. We've seen a lot of struggles in the Melbourne market. The Melbourne government's just released a bit of information around some stamp duty allowance, whether that'll have any effect down there. There's some pretty harsh rules around tenancy reform down there from an investor's point of view, which isn't great. So we as a group, Property NXT, are targeting that southeast Queensland and WA markets because we're just looking at the trends, and that's what you've got to do as an investor. And if there's people moving there, if there's jobs there, if there's money being spent there, then surely you want to live there, opportunity to earn good money, and then therefore capital growth, and then therefore for commercial, there's a need for goods and services. So it all sort of makes sense, and that's the way we're looking at it. And interest rates you'll tell us a bit more about, because I'm always curious.
Yes.
But it's it's a great time for those regions.
Yeah. I've always been quite bullish on southeast Queensland. I grew up in Brisbane, so maybe I'm biased.
It's a
But I
great
just think from a
place.
long-term demographic perspective, and I've talked about this, I think, in previous podcasts, is you've got people moving there, you've got jobs being created, especially since COVID. There's more people that can work remotely or set up offices in Brisbane. The infrastructure is great. Sunshine Coast and Gold Coast are, I think, the actual second and third highest median house prices in the country now, but because they're not major cities, they don't get put on the index. So
It's gone crazy.
yeah, there's just so much demand, and then obviously you've got retirees and boomers that want to live near the beach. Basically, all moving up there as well.
So just to sort of hone in on a region, so the Sunshine Coast, as an example, they're building in Maroochydore. I'm not sure if everyone knows this in your audience, but they're building a $20 billion CBD in Maroochydore. So that's all greenlit, it's planned. That's going to be the second biggest city in southeast Queensland. The airport's now got approval for an international runway. Yeah. So the Maroochydore Airport, that whole region, the health precinct that's gone up and is continuing to go gangbusters in Batinia, which is a fabulous region. And I think southeast Queensland was really undervalued pre-COVID. And if you compare the square metre rates, which is how we do a lot of these price points for residential and commercial, it's still very undervalued compared to Sydney. But it's growing. So as a real estate guy, as a real estate investor, what's the growth potential? There's still, to me, plenty of opportunity for investors because the numbers just stack up still really, really well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think going into the new year, my gut feel is that they'll start to cut rates in February, March next year.
Fantastic.
I've been saying that for a while, but yeah, we'll see. But it's my gut feel is it's always going to be.
Can we hold you to that?
We'll put a bet on after this week. So.
That's exciting.
So I think as soon as that comes in, a bit more of it's been interesting being up here and with a lot of our expat clients, everyone's always a little bit ahead of the trend. So we've got a lot of people that are looking at the moment. They want to be ready for the new year. I always try and tell people though that you want to be greedy when everyone else is fearful. So if you're waiting for everyone else before you get in, you're kind of going to miss the boat as well.
Yeah, I agree. And if you don't mind, can I I'll pivot a little bit to one of the things that we're looking at the moment is off the plan commercial assets. Mm-hmm. So the benefit of off the plan, particularly for Australian and foreign buyers looking to invest back in Australia, is off the plan, like off the plan residential. Off the plan commercial it's a 90-10 contract, which, as you know, is your 10% down today, and that then secures a property until build. So it gives you the asset at today's prices. So you get to secure an industrial site for anywhere from, we've got ones available at the moment on the Sunshine Coast from 700,000 AUD up to 1.5 million. And so you 10% down, secure the asset, get it built. You then get capital uplift by the time it's settled. More time to save, get your deposits and everything ready. And then from there, we source tenants through our management systems in that region, and away you go.
I guess, two questions with that. What are the lead time for some of these developments at the moment? Is it like a 2-year, 4-year?
Anywhere from 12 months up to one of the developers we work with quite closely has just secured another big site, which will sort of launch 26 to be completed. Late 26. So it'll be launching soon to then complete late 26. So 2 years. Yeah.
And then the second question, which was going to tie into kind of the final part of commercial property, is management of these properties. So for the off the plan developments you're talking, can you start to market them before the completion?
You can, definitely. And often with a lot of the properties that are off the plan, you may have tenants that'll approach the developers through us to say, I want to secure something because we know our lease is finishing. So from a business point of view, a tenant's point of view, what are they looking for? They're like people who want to live somewhere new. It's shiny. You can work with the layout, the floor plan, the design, the ins and outs of the property. And so that's a benefit for a tenant too. They can plan years in advance their shift. So there's huge benefits to it. And for us, it's having a suite of options for our clients, is to say, right, do you want to buy an existing commercial piece of real estate? Yes, we can do that. We're partnered with groups back home that can help us to source properties all over Australia. The other one we're really excited about is the off the plan piece. And then, if I'm allowed one more little sneaky thing in here, we partner with some developers who will work with big business to, as an example, we've got a childcare provider up here that's quite keen to enter the Australian marketplace. And so instead of acquiring childcares, they're going to actually invest and build. So it's really multifaceted, and different conversations call for different things, and we think we've got a lot of things covered for our clients that can help them explore what they're thinking.
Definitely, I think, look, we work with a lot of buyers agents, and obviously residential is always very popular, and it's the first asset that most people starting, but having an option to talk about commercial and get to understand commercial is always really helpful.
Yeah, we love both, and I love both. I own both, but residential, you know, I'm the biggest advocate of residential you'll ever meet. But yes, if you do want to have that conversation, it's a great place to put your money, great place to earn great return. Yeah.
If people want to find you, Luke, where's the best place?
PropertyNXT.sg.
Yep.
So we're Singapore based. Can meet for coffee.
Yep.
Can come at night time to your house. Up to you. Whatever you want to do, or Zoom if you don't want to see me.
Good to have a wine with. So.
Good to have a wine with.
Yes.
Good to have a coffee with. Yes, anytime we're available.
I'm sure, Singapore will appreciate it. So.
No, thank you, and we're just happy to be able to help people. We really enjoy it.
Yeah.
It's my passion piece. I love talking real estate. It can be boring for some people, but I love it.
Trust me, it's in the blood for Aussies. So
Oh,
we all love it.
Yeah, it is.
Thanks so much, Luke. Appreciate
Thanks, Tim.